Hello there, this is my history timeline. If you are familiar with my channel, you may know me. But anyways, this is my history timeline thing, and I am blurring out my name for reasons. The rules of this timeline. Hmm. It has it goes from earliest to latest, so 1 AD to 2020 AD. Disputed dates in a timeline of an event will be stated. Duplicates will not be stated. I miswrote that. An event will be split if another event occurs during the same event. And so let's say the Civil War. That'll be split between its start and end, and if it's split by, let's say, the Emancipation Proclamation. And dates will also be stated in the description. 1. Europeans first arrived in North America. They arrived around the year 985, and the first Europeans to land on North America were Vikings, who were usually led astray. They trying to get to other land, most notably Iceland and Greenland. The first recorded person was Eric the Red, who landed in Greenland, and his son Leif Erikson would land in modern-day Canada. Enslaved Africans first arrived in North America, August 9, 1526, or July 30th, 1619. This is a bit disputed. It is said that the first slaves were introduced by pirates, who hijacked a ship and sold the slaves in the modern-day United States. Slaves were introduced around 1502 to Latin America, and those were introduced by Spain and Portugal. Although slavery was already in process in the natives, who were also enslaved other natives. It is generally agreed for North America that African slaves were introduced in 1526. The French and Indian War, 1754 or 1756 to February 1763. The French and Indian War was a conflict fought between the French and the British and their respective colonies. It was part of a bigger conflict between the French and the British. The war officially started in 1756 with Britain formally declaring war, although there were skirmishes before around 1754 with France openly being hostile. The war ended with France losing all of its North American colonies, although they would later gain the area of the Louisiana Purchase through negotiations with Spain. This is where the war was fought, mostly, some of it, and this is a thing of the battle, and this is the Louisiana Purchase. The Declaration of Independence is signed July 2nd to 4th, or 1776, and it was officially signed on August 2nd, 1776. The Declaration of Independence was drafted, and July 2nd was the day that independence was declared. It took until July 4th for the final wording to be approved for the declaration, but it wasn't until August 2nd that it was actually signed formally. The Constitution was ratified March 1st, 1781. While the Declaration of Independence was signed and approved, it wasn't until it wasn't until 5 years later that the Constitution was ratified. That Constitution, we are saying, is the Articles of Confederation, although that was due to many problems with debate and revising the papers. A lot of delay in the ratifying was due to several states wanting not to extend their borders fully west, most notably. This almost ended up with Maryland getting kicked out of the Union. It lasted until the current Constitution went into effect in 1789. The telegraph was invented, 1830 to 1840. The telegraph was invented and worked on by Samuel Morse. It revolutionized long-distance communication, and it worked with electrical signals being sent over pre-laid wires. It would have many later innovations. Michigan becomes a state. January 26, 1837. In 1837, Michigan became the 26th state in the Union. Union, sorry for that, is known as the Great Lakes State, and its motto became Si Quaerius Peninsularum Ammonam Circumspicia and E Pluberius Tuber, meaning if you seek a pleasant peninsula, look about you, and I will defend respectively. It was first settled by natives and was taken by the French. It would be ceded to the British, who ceded to the United States, who first incorporated it into the Northwest Territory before that split into the Indiana Territory and later the Michigan Territory. It would later be occupied by the British during the War of 1812. They also almost went to war with Ohio over the Toledo Strip, and it was because of that it was blocked by Ohio from entry to the Union. That was cleared up with compromise. Ohio would get Toledo, and Michigan would get the Upper Peninsula. It was then admitted. The telegraph was finished around 1840 and will later be updated with a wireless one in 1910. Other innovations, the telegraph was one that could send 4 signals through a single wire. That's this one, I'm pretty sure. Others that would be used specifically for military or air and water communications, and ones that could specify how fast to send that message. The Mexican-American War, April 1846 to February 1848. Mexican-American War was started over a territory dispute over the territory of the Republic of Texas. The Texans had broke away about 10 years before or during that time. Texas had entered into negotiations with the Americans to absorb Texas as a state due to Texas's economy being in decline. When the deal was worked out and signed, Mexico declared war on the United States, which it had threatened. Mexico was bogged down by revolts in California, the Rio Grande, and the Yucatan. By February of 1848, Mexico had ceded vast swaths of territories in the states and had signed for peace. The Yucatan is here. Rio Grande is somewhere here on the Rio Grande River, and this is Texas, who would also claim parts of Wyoming. The Civil War starts. April 1861. The Civil War was a long time coming and being. There were many problems with the systems in place, and everyone seemed to know it. While the North industrialized, the South became even more relied on slave labor. This drove a firm wedge between the Democrats in the South and the Republicans in the North. Many different things were tried to avoid the war, although it erupted shortly after the new president, Abraham Lincoln, with the Confederates firing on Fort Sumter. This was because the Confederates thought that Lincoln would abolish slavery during his presidency, which he ultimately would. The Emancipation Proclamation is signed January 1st, 1863. Issued exactly on the first day of 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was a decree by Abraham Lincoln freeing all the slaves. It also paved the way for the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. The proclamation passed overwhelmingly, as it was mainly supporters who were allowed to vote on it, as most people from the southern states, or people who would have blocked it, had defected and they were not allowed to vote, as they were in revolt. The 13th Amendment is signed January 31st, 1865. Only 30 days and 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, the 13th Amendment also passed, which ruled that slavery or any form of involuntary servitude shall exist within any place that falls in the United States' jurisdiction, with the exception being a sentence for a criminal who has been duly convicted. The amendment also grants Congress the power to enforce the amendment by proper legislation. It was passed much the same way the Emancipation Proclamation was passed due to the Civil War still going on. The Civil War ends April 9th, 1865. The Civil War was coming to an end after several Union victories, although it all came to a head when the Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at the Battle of Palmito Ranch in Texas. The official surrender was in the Appomattox courthouse after the Confederates after that, the Confederates' main general surrendered. The Confederates' defense crumbled after that, and the Confederacy dissolved on May 5th of the same year. African American men were given the right to vote. February 26, 1869 to February 3, 1870. After Lincoln's assassination, the Reconstruction period truly started under Andrew Johnson. It was during this period that the 15th Amendment was passed, confirmed by Congress on February 26, 1896. Next, it took a little less than a year to finish ratifying the amendment, with Iowa being the last state to push it over the 23rd majority needed on February 3rd. Women are given the right to vote. May 12, 1919. After many years of marching and protests and rallying, the dream of Susan B. Anthony and many others was passed with the passage of the Anthony Amendment, and women were finally given the right to suffrage. The Anthony Amendment is the nickname for the 19th Amendment, which states that the right for a vote should not be denied or abridged by the United States nor any state in the Union based on sex. Anthony had died 13 years before his passage, and the amendment has recently celebrated its 150th anniversary. Thanks for listening. That was my timeline of 15 historical American events.